Meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. I hope that everyone is well. Give me 1 second so that I can have a little, so you all can see me clearly. Give me 1 second. I'm used to facing the other way for the sake of seeing my hallway. So thank you all so much for being present and here on time. It's good to see you all. If you all could just do me a favor and oblige me for a moment and just put one thing in the chat that you're grateful for. I think that would be an awesome way to start our meeting today. Just one thing that you are grateful for. You can just put it in the chat. I see health as a reoccurring theme. Dr. Dabrowski, I love that. Sunshine on a chilly day. That's lovely. Yes, to be blessed. Life, wonderful. Well, there's a lot coming in. Yeah, dedicated teacher that I saw connections. That's awesome. And as we think about teaching and learning, right, and folks that are in our schools, everyone that's doing this work, it is challenging. And if anyone says that it is not, they're lying. They don't know what they're talking about. But as we think about what keeps us motivated, right, what keeps us inspired, what keeps us going forward, you know, for me, it's the children. It's my children, right? Seeing them each and every day. They've got challenges. A lot of them are experiencing trauma. A lot of them need additional support, care, and help. And sometimes they don't necessarily have the skills or the tools to express that in ways that we would like for them to. But it's really important that we're consistent and we do our best work for them each and every day. Consistency is the name of the game. And so with that, I hope that everyone is doing well. Okay, I'm glad that folks are here. Thank you, Chief Jones. And we're going to move forward. I want to make sure that we have enough time today to discuss our math and ELA and update as it relates to our R3 plan. So I see several folks that are here, 2 folks in particular that I will acknowledge, and I know that they'll acknowledge the others, but to our Chief Academic Officer, Chief Dabrowski, and to our ED of Teaching and Learning, Mr. Mark Etienne. I just want to say hello to you all, and I'm going to allow you two to take it and introduce folks as you all need to introduce them. To my committee, just know that we'll have moments within our presentations today where staff will pause so that we can have some time to reflect and ask questions because it is a pretty lengthy presentation and discussion, but this is the only thing on our agenda outside of procurement today, so we have the time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chief and to our ED.
Thank you so much, Commissioner McFadden. Good afternoon, everybody. Really excited to be here to share this important update with the Teaching and Learning Board. I am going to have my colleague, Mark Etienne, really kick us off, but I do want to thank you, Commissioner McFadden, for allowing us to go a bit longer, given the importance of the topic, and that we will certainly engage in Q&A throughout in order to keep it interactive. So with that, I'm going to toss to Mark Etienne.
Thank you, Chief Dabrowski, and good afternoon, everyone. Always great to be here in city schools with all of you as colleagues and as partners in this work. Want to piggyback off of something the good commissioner said around how hard it is to do this work right now. I was in a school this morning doing a science learning walk and watching the students engage with their masks on, keeping their distance, watching the teachers make the adjustments and still engage in meaningful instruction was a sight to see. And I just want to really thank sincerely the teachers that are here and who have made the time to be here and share this update. Time is always against us. There's never enough time. And the fact that you all are here with us right now really not only speaks to your dedication to your students, but to our district. And I just wanted to stop and start the meeting by saying thank you so much for making the time to be here. Let's get this party started. So today, and as always, if we go to the next slide, I want to reiterate that all the work we do in the academics office, and in particular, the Office of Teaching and Learning, is intentionally aligned to our board's strategic priorities. And so as you see here outlined in blue, we take the time to make sure that we are living up to these priorities and delivering on them, and open ourselves up to feedback and, when necessary, the appropriate pushes so that we deliver on these promises. Next slide, please. And so in short today, this is a high-level overview, but what we'd like to do is share the data that we've had a chance to study at the national level as well as at the district level. And it wasn't very surprising. We expected to see some of what we saw. And so you'll now see what we've seen, what we've focused on. And the rest of it will be around the strategies that we designed at the beginning of the year. And now that we've seen the data, I'm getting more deeply involved in and trying to build more robust support for schools. And so you'll see the data, you'll hear about the strategies we've designed, how we're beginning to implement them, and most importantly, what schools are experiencing and what this looks and feels like to schools. I think it's important to consistently say we are in very much a learning space. This is the first time across the country, schools, K-12 schools, and in some cases universities, have had to deal with the context that we're in. We're taking it head on. And again, the educators that are on the call represent a much larger group of teachers that are learning as we go. And so again, open to feedback and the questions as we continue to share for the time we have today. Next slide, please. And so again, here you've seen this slide before. This is the framework for our R3 plan. I'll bring your attention to the bottom rectangle in those 3 red squares, where personalized learning, acceleration, and reimagined time for students are the strategies that we'll be digging into today. And later you'll see a slide, I think, where you'll see how we connect all of the strategies together, and we think about them all as one group of strategies, but today we're focusing on these 3. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's jump into the data. I want to give a shout out to my good buddy and colleague, Heather Nolan. Good to see you, Heather, and I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. My name is Heather Nolan. I serve as the Director of Knowledge Management in the Office of Achievement and Accountability. And we partner very closely with academics and our school support teams in really digging into our data, which we'll be sharing some key views today to the board as well as the public. To start us off, we wanted to first set the context and provide a beginning of year assessment primer on the district's website. You can get access to what the full scope of our assessment strategy is. But for the purpose of this conversation at the beginning of year, we wanted to focus on our diagnostic assessments. And you can really think about, a diagnostic assessment serving as a pretest that helps us learn about how much preloaded information or knowledge a student has entering the school year. And as Mark was referencing, this is incredibly important given last year, the majority of our students were in a virtual learning setting due to the COVID pandemic. And so the 2 assessments that we're going to focus on is first on Amplify in the reading category. And this is a foundational literacy skill assessment that we give to students in grades K to 5. The results tell us what skills a student has mastered or is struggling with in order to become a better reader. And then the other reading assessment is our Iready Diagnostic Assessment, which we administer to students in grade band 6 to 8 and 9 through 11. And in our math area, we use Iready Diagnostic for grade bands K through 11. And the Iready assessment is an adaptive test that adjusts its questions based on a student's response. So think of if you answer the question correctly, consistently, you're going to be given slightly harder questions so that we can level set and see at what grade level you are entering and ready to receive the on-grade level content. And we can use that information to not just support you in the classroom, but then also through other instructional and academic resources. So we are going to cover Amplify and Ireti. With these 2 assessments, you can go to the next slide. Thanks, Casey. With these 2 assessments, we are able to access and view national trend data since a large number of school districts utilize both Amplify as well as Iready. And so we find that it's really important as we think about the performance of this school district, especially in light of the COVID pandemic, that we look at our performance alongside the national average, but where possible, also like school districts that have a similar student population that we serve. And so as we go through the slides, in some instances, you will see that like school comparison. But overall, we wanted to just briefly touch on some key highlights that our partners in our partnering vendors of Amplify and Curriculum Associates have shared with us, and that we're seeing translate into our assessment. So first, on the reading end, we see nationally that fewer students began the year on grade level, as witnessed in Amplify and Iready. The declines that we see nationally, we also observed in our data and in other urban districts. On the math side with our Iready, we also saw that there is, at the beginning of this year, a smaller percent of students that started the year on grade level than in pre-pandemic terms. And more importantly, we are seeing an increase in the students that are 2+ grade levels below. So we knew to expect a decline, but because of the compounding nature of the COVID pandemic, we're seeing more students fall further behind than where we were pre-pandemic in school year 1920. And just to note that, you know, for us as a school district, we really utilize the DIBELS and the Iready assessment to really inform our internal strategy and monitoring our progress, and to support our schools in understanding what the needs of our students are. And so that's what Mark was mentioning we'll be able to talk more about later on after I cover the data slides here. All right, so this slide here shows us our Amplify data. So again, this is for grades K to 5. The green bars are our 3-year national trends of our Amplify DIBELS 8 results. And so you can see there, just in following how the green bars are declining, we're seeing a significant drop in student performance due to COVID-19. And you see it very much from the school year 1920 in that light green to school year 21-22 in that dark green bar. In some cases, more than 8 percentage points or double-digit percentage points as the grades progress. The gray bar shows what city schools' performance was at the beginning of this year. And so what the gray bars are showing us is, you know, on a good note is, as the years progress, we see a larger percentage of our students ready for core reading instruction. And so that's at our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade level. The challenge that we're really seeing, and it mirrors this national challenge as well, is that our kindergarten and our 1st graders are really coming in struggling and accessing that core reading instruction with, you know, less than a quarter of our students on or above benchmark in grades K and in 1st grade at the beginning of this year. Next slide. So this is where we are going to share our Iready data. We're going to focus this view on our grades 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. There's a lot of bars here, so I'm going to work from left to right. On the left-hand side, where you see that norms bar, you're looking at what the historical national average is on our Iready performance for those middle grades in reading. Alongside it is what the beginning of year results were for all students that tested on Iready nationwide. And then the next 2 bars, the CGCS and urban districts, are our comparative school districts, if you will, those districts that are part of the consortium or the Council of Great City Schools. And then urban are the like schools that have a very similar student demographic that we do in Baltimore City. And so what you see for each of these grades is, historically, while we did see, you know, a good percentage of students 2+ grade levels below, we see that increase not just across all of the school districts that tested, but especially so with our urban and also in Baltimore City. So we have an increasing percentage of our students below grade level when it comes to reading in the middle grades. And then next slide. And then on math, following that same view from left to right, but this is now looking at our grades K to 8. We see that overall, a lot of school districts did struggle, and we have an increase in the percentage of students 2+ grade levels below. But it's even more pronounced at the district level here, with roughly 35% or 37% of our students 3+ grade levels below. And so those are the types of students that we want to make sure we're targeting and providing supports to, while also tending to the needs of all students across this distribution in accessing that on grade level content. And then next slide. I'm going to now pass it over to my teaching and learning peers that can talk about what we're doing based on this data.
Thanks a lot, Heather. And so again, having looked at the data, processed the data, not just at the district level, but in similar like schools, urban schools across the country, our partner schools and the Council of Great City Schools, and then the entire national landscape, we now have a different lens to think through the key strategies that we're implementing this year, particularly around accelerated learning, personalized learning, and reimagined time for students. And so moving forward, we want to dig into that a little bit and share a little bit about how we've begun to work through these strategies, learn from these strategies so that we can come back and continue to implement them in a stronger fashion. Before we do that, just as a reminder, in front of you now, you see all of our R3 key strategies from the plan. And the bookends are around wellness, school culture, and climate, and then expanded opportunities. And as a reminder, we launched the school year late August, early September, really investing deeply in providing a strong environment for students to return to. So we did a lot of work around school culture, around climate. You see in there social emotional learning, mental health supports. And as we moved into the later months of the fall and now the winter, we're digging into a lot more of our personalized learning, acceleration strategy, and reimagined time, all for the sake of making sure that as we move through the next couple of years, we have a much stronger structure for helping our students to recover the learning. Because as you can see by the data, we've got a lot of catching up to do. So the idea is to build these strong systems in place, be able to monitor them, be able to learn from them, and then begin to accelerate our students. Next slide, please. And so that's what we're going to dig into moving forward, what those structures look like. We've learned that to really accelerate students, we've got to look a lot more deeply at personalized learning and isolating what students need by digging deeper into the data and then being able to meet their needs. You'll hear more about that from some of the teachers that we have here to share with us today. But at this point, I'm going to hand it off to my partner, Ms. Aquila James, to dig into a little bit more around acceleration and personalized learning.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Mark and Heather. I appreciate that. What we want to do at this time is just walk you through the systems that allow us to support that personalized learning. They bucket into 3 specific areas. One, the resources that we offer. They're listed here as it relates to the learning platforms, and additionally, the small group instruction, as well as the tutoring. Next slide, please. All right, when we think about personalized learning, we're thinking about how we use assessment data to really provide individualized learning for each of our students. And so what you have here is a slide that allows us to, one, ground on how we are defining personalized learning. And so what you see here is that students' individual needs are actually met specifically through an adaptive tool that we use. These platforms, again, are adaptive. They're used by students at home and or at school. They're also tailored to meet the student specific needs. I want to just really hone into the fact that they're using assessment data to create very individualized learning lessons for those students in order to move them to grade level. The personalized learning platforms that we use include the Amplify Reading, Iready, Achieve 3000, and Zern, as well as Imagine Math. And so we have provided personalized learning platforms for all of our grades. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means, what the recommendations has been as it relates to using personalized learning to allow students to get back onto grade level instruction. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that is really important that we share, and we've had the pleasure of sharing with our school leaders, is what our desired state is. I think Mark did a dynamic job in just really setting today's stage and allowing everyone to realize that we're all learning together. And so because we're learning together, it's important to provide a guiding principle, an aim, and or a focus for all of us to be able to track and monitor our progress, meaning our scholars' progress, through the utilization of personalized learning. And so when our scholars are engaged in personalized learning platforms for students that are in K through 5th grade, we're asking schools to engage them 2 to 3 times per week, at least 15 minutes each session for a total of 45 minutes a week. And this is for ELA. And so when we think in terms of the 6th through 8th grade, we're thinking in terms of, again, 2 to 3 times a week, 15 minutes each session for, again, a total of about 45 minutes. When we think about our 9th through 12th grade, we want our teachers to make sure students are actively engaging using Achieve 3000 is one of the resources that we have, as well as, Achieve 3000 for like 2 to 3 times a week. I think what's really key here is that we're saying that this is our desired state. We're not here yet, but this is the aim and the focus that we want our educators to get to, because we realize that as our scholars engage in personalized learning, it supports an overall acceleration look, which is for our goal, which is to make sure that our scholars are on grade level. Next slide, please. Okay, and to talk a little bit about our personalized learning desire state for math, we want to spend our time and just hone in on that 30 minutes per week for kindergarten scholars. And then when you go to the 1st through 5th grade, we're going to increase that time 3 times per week, about 30 minutes each session for a total of 90 minutes. And you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of good time that the student can engage in. Again, they can engage in that during class. They can engage in the personalized learning platforms at home. But it's very vital for our scholars to utilize these resources, and those resources again are Zern, Iready, and Imagine Math for math, as much as possible to support them. In grades 6 through 12, that's 2 times per week at 30 minutes each session for a total of 60 minutes. And so these are some of our desired states for math. Again, we completely recognize where we are today, and we are excited to know that our teachers as well as our school leaders are clear on where we need to be. Okie dokie. Next slide, please. All right, I have the awesome pleasure of introducing our educator, Carly Harkins from Hamden Elementary School, who's going to tell us a little bit about first of engaging in the personalized learning platform. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome.
I think so. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here, and I thank everybody for helping me present today. I'm here. My name's Carly Harkins. I'm working at Hamden Elementary School. I'm teaching 5th grade math and science this year. And I'm excited to talk to you about Zern and why I think it's working. You spoke about that desired place, right, where we want to be. I'm really hopeful that my students are in that and really practicing in that space. And so I think it's made a really big difference. So I'm excited to share it with you guys today. So this first slide is just a really simple visual, just so you can see what my students are seeing every day. When they come in, they can see what their personalized learning, it's right up here behind me. It's live and in person. You can see that we write down the lesson that we're on and what students are expected to be working on that day. I try to get students to do about 3 lessons per week, give or take. We know schedules are always what they are. Iready also comes into play. So this Zern use that we're doing is part of that layered approach within personalized learning. Students are expected in my class to do 4 lessons by Friday. That's their homework. They can do some of it in class if they have extra time, but they're expected to do 4 lessons every day or every week with an 80% or above average. So they're given that, and then they get to do some fact practice. We know that us math teachers love to make sure they know their facts and learn those, so they get to do some practice with that as well. So that's just sort of just a big picture of how I use personalized learning in my classroom. So we can go to the next slide. Awesome. So in terms of the approach of how I do it, I think that the most important thing that I can share with you guys is just that I think that Zern gives so much more of a big picture of the student content, right? So I'm able to teach at the front board. We do our review, we do our whole group instruction. All the students are engaged in learning, and we have great discussions, right? But what I think Zern does is it gives students more at bats, right? It gives them more exposure to that grade level content. It allows them to be successful in that individualized perspective and not just from me, right? So I think it's been really helpful for students to get to see that math content real life with that immediate feedback and be able to get some more just headway, I think, in terms of what you could get with just the teacher and the student and just with pencil and paper. So I found it really useful for that. So again, Zern is really providing that current content perspective. Iready is that adaptive piece. And then the fact practice is always ongoing. So those are the 3 levels of what I do with the students. And then when it comes to after the whole group and we've discussed the new content, we've had some good peer discussions, and then it's time for them to do their personalized learning, students will get on Zern and their lesson for that day. So what students are doing is they're able to complete that during the small group time, right? So I sit right here at my small group table, and students are working on Zern in the classroom in their seats, which is behind me, right? So they're able to do that and navigate through their platform. So they're very used to this procedure, and they go in and get that immediate feedback, right, live and in person. Then when they come to me, they're able to get that feedback in an individual way on pencil and paper or on a whiteboard or whatever activity we're doing that day. And then they're also being able to have peer interaction time where they're able to have more discourse over the content with peers and doing more traditional things like problem sets and exit tickets and things like that with Eureka. So I think that Zern is really a dynamic thing that I hope that we'll continue to use in the district, because it just provides a different lens of which students can be successful in the content, not just with a peer or with pencil and paper or with me. They're able to do it in an interactive way, and they get that immediate feedback right away. In terms of, I think that's what is beneficial for students. I think for teachers, it's great for me because I know that it's aligned to the curriculum. I know that I can trust the lessons that I'm previewing and making sure that it's aligned with what I'm teaching. Students are even sometimes given the exact same examples that I'm doing at the board, so they're able to practice it again. And it's built into the Eureka curriculum. So it's really helpful just because it's already built into what we're doing. So I don't have to really do a ton more of research or additional planning. It's already there for me. It's easy to move within a module, right? So in the math, for my math teachers out there who are with me, we know that sometimes we add in additional lessons from module 1 within module 2, right? So I can easily move students back to module 1, have them do the lessons there, then go back to module 2 and pick up where we left off. So it's been really great. I think in terms of differentiation, there's some things that are built in there too, so that I can have students move within a mission or even have students work on different grade levels that they need extra support in. So I can differentiate it that way too. So I think it's really been helpful for me, and I hope it's something that the district continues to utilize, because I think it's given my students a leg up a lot in terms of the math content. So this is just a little bit of another lens of how I do the group rotations with Zern embedded in here. So Zern would come in that personalized learning group, right? So the first group they see with me in the small group table, and we have conversations about the content, whether it's unfinished learning or the content that we're working on right now, or accelerating their learning to extend their the current content that we're working on. The next station that they'll go to is the personalized learning, where they'll work on their Zern, their Iready lessons, and their ongoing fact practice. Zern is that non-negotiable though. They have to do that, and they have to make sure that they get that lesson completed before they leave me. It's really important to me that they get that level of support that they have inside the classroom. And I think if they ask questions, if they get stuck, they can ask me questions, and get support there as well. And then independent work is usually a more traditional paper and pencil model where they're actually able to work out their problem solving activities in the independent work section. So they rotate through those three sections every day. So it's a really predictable model for students. And I think it gives me those three different stations that students are interacting with the content at a sort of a higher level when it comes to math, and they're able to be successful in that new content that they're learning that day. And I can infuse in the unfinished learning as well. So it's a really nice layered approach for me. So I just want to thank you. I know that we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to just thank you for inviting me to the meeting and letting you know that I really appreciate having teachers' voices heard in this setting. And I'm really hoping that we continue to work on Zearn. I know a lot of the teachers, Hamden, we really are very focused on Zearn, and we have some of the highest percentages, I think, of usage, and it's really making a difference here. So I hope that you'll consider using it in the future. But I just want to thank everybody for letting me speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Ms. Harkins. We appreciate it. And we are confident that your scholars are going to be able to demonstrate learning, and just a big kudos to you. Thank you so much. Next slide. At this time, we want to pause and take a moment to respond to any questions you have, given the information that was just shared with you on personalized learning platforms or any of the data that was shared as well.
Commissioner Griffin, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. One, I just have to start off by saying thank you all so much for including folks who are on the ground using these tools. The implementation piece is always a question that I will ask. And so to be able to hear from you, Ms. Harkins, is so important. And I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for taking the time to really explain what this looks like in your classroom, right? I do have a few questions. I would just love to hear a little bit more from you, honestly. Like when you started talking about the Hamden community and how other teachers that you know may be using this model, or other math teachers. Shout out to the math teachers. I was a math teacher too, so special love there. Hey, but I really would love to know if you have heard any other feedback from other teachers around infusing this personalized learning time along with this small group time into their classrooms. Like what implementation may be looking like from some other colleagues in Hamden that you may have heard, if you're able to share that.
Sure. I think, I want to just first shout out Hamden. This is my first year at Hamden, and they just really showed me how great Zearn is, and they told me to do it. So I feel kind of silly being the one to talk to you guys today, because there's so many other people who have done really an amazing job. But I drew the straw, so here I am. But anyway, no, I think Zearn is great, and I really think that, when I did the math talk about Zearn for the math office, I talked about how, given the state of affairs right now, I'm not really interested in coming to anyone's classroom and saying, here's another thing to do, right? Teachers are really, really on the edge right now, and so are students and parents and families and schools, and we're just going through a lot right now. And I think the thing that's great about this platform is it comes in easily, right? So it's not asking you to do an additional thing. It's not asking you to plan additional materials. You have to think about it, and you have to decide what to go where and when to who, but it really does align with so much of the work that we're already doing. It's sort of an automatic benefit, right? So you're not having to implement new things. That said, we do at Hamden, and I know other places of other colleagues that I work with across the district, everyone's kind of using it in a little bit of a different way. I think we have sort of this desired space of where we want people to be, and people are starting to slowly come around to that. So there's definitely some work to do there for sure. But I think it's really, once people start to use it, they can start to, make it their own, but also know that it's something that is, at the very least, is students getting more exposure to that content and students interacting with that content every day. So even though we might use it all a little bit differently, it's still a benefit to students. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And you got it. One of the pieces that I was thinking through was, how does this look from classroom to classroom? when we're talking about putting these things into practice with students and building the lesson plan and what your classroom structure looks like. So I am curious too around process, like how you thought through the infusion of Zern, and also like if Hampden had any structures in place for you that helped you understand how to infuse this into your classroom and your teaching style to be successful at this point. Like, what was the process you went through to think through it, and how did you come to the model that you use today?
Yeah, so a lot of it was sort of grassroots, right? So it wasn't anybody saying, and I've heard of Zern, I've used it in the past at my old school and other schools that I've been at. I think I was able to use sort of piecemeal here and there. But this school was really on board with it. And so the administration and support people were really on board with making sure that I felt supported in using it. And mainly it was just conversations with other teachers. You know, how do you use it? All right, show me what it looks like. How do you use it? You know, show me where to go, show me what to do. I think those are, you know, a lot of the most meaningful professional developments you can have, right? Is teachers talking to other teachers about how it's useful and if it's working and why it's working. You know, there's definitely drawbacks. You know, there's some people who will say, I liked this that they took away, or I used to use it this way and now I can't do that anymore. So there's things that have been tweaked over the years, but I think for the most part, it's just, you know, teachers talking to teachers about how it's benefiting students and kind of selling it to each other.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ms. Harkins. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
My last question is for the broader team around how we're measuring how we're measuring the amount of learners that are accessing the platforms that were mentioned earlier. Like, we have the goals, and I'm so glad to see those goals. I'm just curious around measurement. Like, are we looking at unique learners, unique learner hours, and how that might be parsed out, and when we might be able to start to see some of that data too?
I'll take a stab at it, and then I can hand it off to some members of my team. Again, I think we're beginning to learn what we're seeing in the field in terms of the use of the platforms. We certainly collect usage data by grade level, by school level. I don't know the extent to which we can drill it down to unique learners. That's an interesting question. I would defer to our director of math, Ms. Steinbrenner, who's in our interim kind of role, director of math. But I do think that as we continue to use the platforms and learn from teachers like Ms. Harkins, we will start to look very differently at different cuts of data. So to your request on the type of data that you just mentioned, we're happy to bring that back as we continue to unpack it and learn from it. We started with just usage by school, by grade level. And I think as we get into classrooms to see how it's implemented, because as she mentioned, it can be implemented in different ways. We're learning on which pieces of data to start focusing in on, because we want to make sure that as many students as possible are engaged, not only in Zern, but on our other platforms as well. So if anyone else has an addition to that, I'm wide open to other details we can add.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. I think you mentioned it a little bit, and I certainly saw that Ms. Harkins had some components of her expectations that is ways that we measure it. And that's one, time on the platform. How much time are you spending on the platform? The completion of lessons. How many lessons have you completed? But more importantly, how did you perform on the lessons? Did you receive an 80% or higher? And the 80% is the threshold. That's what we're looking at. When we think in terms of unique students, we have the opportunity to group our students accordingly and to look into data in that way. We can filter the data to see how different types of students are performing. But because we're really focusing very much on personalizing that, we're really honing into the individual students. Very soon, we're going to talk about that small group, more of that homogeneous grouping. But for sure, we can definitely look at different unique student groups and how they're performing along the adaptive learning platform. We're hoping we're answering your question.
Yes, absolutely. You all are doing a great job answering these questions, and I'm really excited about where this is headed. If I were in the classroom right now, I can only imagine how I would try to utilize a lot of these tools. And like you said, Ms. Harkins, there's so many things that come at teachers and administrators in the school, but to know that there's something that has come to the school community and, you know, educators to utilize that as helpful, and can also still allow that space of creativity and autonomy in the classroom. That's so important when you're a teacher. It makes me happy to see and to hear. But thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin, Commissioner Chinya. Commissioner Reed, do you have any thoughts?
This is Commissioner Reed. Great presentation, ladies and gentlemen. My question, I guess this is a learning process for me. So it looks like Zern is the learning platform and Iready is the testing platform. So how the iterations work and what's the methodology of moving from the testing to the evaluation? And I know it's pretty nascent. So how long and when can we say we're moving toward your goal of grade level or better for the kids? How's that dynamic work?
I think that's an outstanding question, and I thank you so much for it. Mark, did you want to go forward, or is it okay if I go? How'd you want to?
Of course, I'm right behind you.
All righty, that's great. If I could just take the first portion and just hone in on the Iready component. The Iready is an assessment that we use. We use that platform for diagnostic assessments, but we also use that platform for personalized instruction. So it has a two-prong approach. One, it uses the BOY, the beginning of the year assessment, in order to provide very specific lessons for that student based off of how they responded or performed on the BOY assessment, the beginning of the year assessment. Once they have a list of lessons that the student should engage in, that's where the personalized instruction component comes into play. Please note that with Iready really looks at a ton of domains, and based on where you perform in each particular domain, it might take you higher than grade level, it might take you lower than grade level, it meets you right where you are. It's adaptive, and it allows the teacher to gauge how the student is performing within the respective domains. When we think of, in fact, I will turn it over if you want to talk about Zern, but when we think about Zern, we're thinking very much this nice pairing with our Eureka curriculum. Our Eureka curriculum is definitely grade level instruction being provided. And with the utilization of Zern, there are personalized instructions that further support where our students may have, or I should say our teachers, through a pre-assessment, a prereq type of assessment, where they might have assessed that a student needs additional support. That's where Zern further provides that grade level specific support. Feel free, anyone on the team, if you would like to add to, go for it.
In terms of the second part of your question, Commissioner Reed, I think it's really difficult to say at this point. So I think part of what we want to do this year is start to establish some baseline data around what we're learning from implementing Zern, implementing Iready, so that we can then start to project the type of growth we want to expect from our students across the system. Some of it has to do with things like device distribution and attendance, so that we could get on a consistent plane, and then we can start to see more consistent data. What I will say is, where we see instances of consistent implementation of Zern, of the curriculum, we begin to see larger growth from students. So if and when we're able to establish more consistent structures like what you just saw from Ms. Hardin in Zern and in Iready, and if we can get to that place, which is our purpose this year, we expect to see at least more than a year's growth from students as we continue to implement these strategies. And then as we learn more about that data, we should be able to set more concrete goals that will close the gap between grade level and where our students are now. So the first thing is to make sure that as we're using these platforms, we get a good sense of our baseline data. And then the second thing is to make sure that across the system, we're not only normed, but consistent in our implementation, so that we can begin to project how much we can close the gap. And so as we continue to make that progress, we'll make it our priority to keep you all informed of where that is and how we start to close that gap. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Chair,
And thanks, Kerry, for adding that into the chat. Appreciate it.
Chair McFadden, may I ask another question? Hello?
Go for it, Commissioner Reed. We're okay.
Okay, I guess my second question is, okay, you pull up the slide of first graders, and how first graders, because of the COVID, during their kindergarten period, had a really tough time. So looking at trend lines, I guess historically it looks like, because I guess K to 5, I think you said it was 37% below, and 7th to 8th, 9th graders, 6th to 8th graders, it was like 62% below, I guess, in terms of like 3 years behind. So if the first graders had such a tough time based on historics, is that bode poorly going forward, or is this mitigation going to help a lot in terms of catch up?
Excellent question. Again, I'll start off and invite my colleagues to jump in. Generally speaking, the younger the student, the better chance to be able to get them back on track, especially if we can provide interventions early on, i.e. first grade, second grade, that help them to form stronger conceptual understandings and build stronger math skills. This gets a lot more difficult when you get into the older grades, middle school, and sometimes early high school as well, where children have already fallen so far behind that in order to get to proficiency, they've got to go through multiple levels and sections of study. At the kindergarten, first grade, and second grade level, given what they're learning and given the skills that they need, I think we still have a greater chance of bringing them back up to grade level than you'd see from older students. But again, I'd like to invite colleagues in to chime in as well.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly, Commissioner Reed, to say that I think when you hear a lot about the energy we're putting into tutoring for early grades, and we think about how we're looking closely at our K-3 literacy block and how we allocate time, that intensive work we're trying to do, and I think we often talk about like kindergarten first, second, that window of sort of like early learning, and prioritizing that, I think exactly to what Mark is saying, so that we can try to address these gaps sooner than later. The longer we wait, the harder they are to overcome, for a variety of reasons. And I don't want to try to. This is really challenging work, as we can see in the data. There is a lot of learning loss that students experienced while we were remote, and so being back in person, while we're still transitioning into this space of living and coming to school with COVID and mitigating all of those things, we know that these times in person are going to help our youngest learners where we see the biggest gaps right now.
So how can the system articulate this to parents and families? What you just told me, you and Mark.
Yep. I mean, I think the conversations we're having about extended learning, about why it's so important for students to be part of an extended learning program if offered at their school, or the participation in tutoring, and recognizing this particular sort of urgency in these early grades. These are the conversations that teachers certainly will be having with families and students, and with principals, with families, as we're making recommendations of prioritizing that tutoring and extended learning opportunities. These are the exact things we need to be saying. The same things that we're saying here now, is that our attention, particularly around this literacy and math spaces, and as I think we're highlighting these personalized learning platforms, we highlighted a math example with Zern, but we also have Amplify Reading, and Iready also works for reading. And these platforms can be used at home as well as in school. So wherever we can bolster up the time that families are supporting their youngsters around these areas, both at home, in addition to the time we're placing at school with the tutoring extended learning, like it is like everybody wrap their arms around this and prioritize. And I think that's the messages we're working on and working towards, and certainly are sharing with all of our school-based colleagues when we're in conversation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Chinya, Chair Emeritus.
Yeah, I just want to, just as a reminder and, slightly good news, the fact that when we look at some of the data around kindergarten and first grade,
remembering that many students did not participate in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten during the time that we were not there. And some of our data, even for enrollment for this year, is encouraging at the number of students that are now participating. So I agree with what you're saying, for, you know, in terms of the personalized learning, but we also need to be aware of that we did not have some of that. And we had great data around what happens when our students are able to be a part of our pre-kindergarten and kindergarten programs.
Mr. Etienne, I did see you come back in. I'm not sure if you had anything to contribute or if we can move on. I saw you and then you went back away.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of move us along for time, but I'll just reinforce what Chief Dabrowski said and also what Ms. Guthrie says in the chat. There are other ways as well. The reports that Ms. Guthrie mentions, but also we took a big step forward with student learning plans this year. It's the first time we've done something like this. It's an opportunity for families to meet with teachers, get a better understanding of their students' needs and interests, but also their academic performance and goals that they're setting towards closing the gap between grade level and where they are. So that's another opportunity, Commissioner Reed, for parents to be informed on how this plays out both in school and at home, is when they have that dialogue with teachers using the student learning plan.
Thank you.
That's good wait time, but we can move on.
All righty. Well, thank you kindly. The second system of support that we would like to share with you guys under our personalized learning is our small group instruction. You can go ahead and turn, thank you kindly. Just to let you guys know, we did provide 3 guiding principles for our small group instruction, which is before you. And as you're reading through the slide, I do want to just offer that our small group instruction is for all of our grades, for primary, meaning kindergarten, all the way through our 12th grade. And so what we're asking our teachers to do is to utilize that data to provide additional tiered support in small groups. And so students are strategically identified and the personalized instruction aligns to the students' learning needs. That small group may be a homogeneous group, so students might have similar learning needs that might be in that particular group. Small group also reinforces and or reteaches specific skills and concepts to a smaller group. So really honing into critical skills that a student might have demonstrated on an assessment that they aren't able to yet master as it relates to what that standard may be. And lastly, the small group guiding principle includes just a dynamic space for learning where students can receive accelerated support to access grade level instruction. And so earlier you saw a traditional outline of us unpacking our R3 strategies, and it included that acceleration. So it's really important to say that our small group instruction is really ensuring that we're honing in into specific and critical skills that our students need in order to ensure that they go right back up to and or should be able to access a grade level instruction. Next slide, please. Similarly to our personalized learning platform usage, we also wanted to create a guiding light for our educators and school leaders when it comes to ELA and math with respect to small group instruction. And so for students in grades K through 3, we're asking for at least 30 minutes each day. And in students in 4 through 8, we're going to up that about 15 additional to 45 minutes a day. And then when we talk about our 9th through 12th grade, roughly 45% of the instructional block. And as you know, our schedules look a little different at various schools at the high school level. So it was important for us to note the percentage of time that we're asking our educators to engage in small group instruction. Next slide, please. And when we look at our math, our desired state is very similar, but just a little bit more of time. And so for our kindergarten scholars, we're asking 15 minutes during the 60-minute math block. And then for our scholars from grades 1 through 12, at least 30 minutes during that 75-minute math block. And so you'll see here that there's a very specific amount of time that we're asking our educators to carve out to provide that small group instruction. Again, just probably overly communicate. It's just so important, as you saw with the data, for us to really be able to provide small group instruction where our scholars can grow together. And then we talked already about the utilization of even the personalized learning platforms during small group. I think our teacher, Ms. Harkins, shared that sometimes during her small group, students are able to use that personalized learning platform. All right, next slide, please. And now I get the lovely pleasure of introducing Dr. Joy Guthrie. Thank you so much for joining us, and please share with us your experience with small group instruction and practice.
Good afternoon, everyone. As previously mentioned, I am a lead Blueprint ILS coach for Marie G. Faring Elementary Middle School, where I have the pleasure of supporting literacy instruction from grades K through 8 and providing support to teachers within the field of literacy. And currently at MGF, we kind of looked at small groups and wanted to decide where we were going with small groups and being really intentional with small groups, because we knew this was going to be the time within each instructional blocks to really leverage getting kids the support they needed, whether that be in a specific area or specific domain. So right here on this slide is actually kind of the steps we took as a school to get small groups into place and to really make them purposeful, not just on the teacher end, but for students as well. So within the beginning of the school year, we had teachers self-assess where they thought they stood with implementing small groups, because before anything could be successful, you have to have an understanding of what it is and how to do it. So if we didn't know where teachers stood, and not just at a general level, but more specifically with each individual teacher, we knew we needed to provide additional support so those teachers geared off of where they stood. After that, we then developed expectations for what the small group should look like in the classroom setting. And I think the previous presenters did an excellent job of kind of laying out the context of what it looks like within the classroom setting. But what should students be doing while a teacher is meeting with a certain group of students? Those independent stations, what are they including? Is it going to be that platform usage? Is it going to be additional activities to supplement what they've been working on? So specifically identifying within the classroom settings what should be occurring during those times that students may not necessarily be meeting with you or even meeting with you, because we also wanted to make sure we leverage with teachers that there are additional curriculum resources already identified for you to be utilizing during that time. So making sure that those are the resources that we leaned into when completing this time. And last, during that month, we also wanted teachers to ensure that they were teaching the routines and procedures that can occur during the small group setting. So thinking as small as what's going to happen if a student has a question while you're working with an additional set of students. How are students going to get support during that time without necessarily continuously coming in to interject with the teacher? Who are they going to reach out to? What happens if a student finishes early on something? What is the next thing for them to do? So really understanding how these contexts of small groups were going to work within the classroom setting. Right. And during this time, simultaneously, those BOY assessments were being given. So students weren't necessarily grouped yet into their profiles, but just similarly just kind of going along with groups in their classroom. In the October timeframe, we then started utilizing that BOY data in addition to those platform usage reports that were previously mentioned. So you started to see where kids were having areas of success or needs of growth. Then we started kind of profiling kids together. Hey, these group of students really need to work on X, Y, and Z, and really then starting to make those groups based on where we saw students performing at. Then based on this information, we started to use, again, those curriculum tools. So the Iready lessons that are provided to teachers that can say, hey, kids have this specific deficit. These are the lessons that you can utilize to support those kids when they're working with you as a teacher to get that skill down. The same thing occurs with the Amplify platform, that they provide these lessons to teachers to support a similar groups of students. And also the district, I think, does a great job with providing the TAP plans, which are targeted assistant plans for students that say, hey, these kids fall into this context. These are the activities. These are the sounds. These are the letters. These are the types of focuses that you should really be working with students in order to get them caught up to their grade level standards. So in addition to that, we also then as a team started to devise what are the expectations if we went to go look into each other's classrooms, what should we be looking for? What should we notice? Not just on the teacher side of things, but students. How are we noting what students are doing and honestly measuring progress for students? So remember, on a day-to-day basis, we always want to see what students are doing and how they are progressing to where they need to be. And this can be done in a formal or an informal context, but we never just want kids to just be idly sitting there or just engaging in this activity that has no purpose for them. So we as teachers wanted to identify what were those look for during that time frame as well. During November timeframe, the admin team and the leadership team and the instructional team started to conduct informal observations around small groups. So how do we know what's really going on? And again, given these two previous cycles kind of within the months, where do we stand as a school? Where do we stand at a specific content areas and even individually as teachers? This is not an I got you moment. This is literally leverage to provide support at this point in time. Based on the information we found, we decided to then refine kind of those expectations as needed. So instead of saying, hey, you may be having 3 15-minute rotations, we may need to now reduce down to 2 20-minute rotations to really make sure teachers are getting that time with students or students are really getting that time to access platforms every day. So just kind of taking a step back, assessing where we were, and then refining anything that we needed to do. Additionally, during this time, we offered a unique opportunity for at least our ELA teachers. So when they meet weekly with content colleagues, so 3 to 5 may meet together as literacy teachers, we decided to provide them with the opportunity of something that we had them engage with their students, which was choice board, right? You have a list of activities they needed to complete, and within this week's context, how you decided to get that activity done, that is up to you. But just know all of these things need to be done, and then you may have the may do's on this side. So when they're in this collaborative setting, teachers engage in professional learning based on where they were independently as a teacher. So this may mean you're looking at a video about just implementing small groups. Another teacher may be looking at a video based on teacher-led small groups. So really focusing on specific needs to make sure teachers felt comfortable with small groups, because the biggest thing we found is that the implementation of small groups really relied on how comfortable a teacher was. The more a teacher felt comfortable with something, the more opportunities that were going to be available to students to engage with certain lessons during this time. So we felt that if we leveraged our teachers to be in a position where they walked away extremely comfortable in the work, we knew then that we would see that kind of play out into our student achievement and success along the way. And along this, we were also using progress monitoring data to ensure that students were making marks along the way. And if they weren't, we stopped. Within collaborative planning, we analyzed all the data points and then said, hey, we need to come up with a different plan or regroup these students because I really think this child may need this instead of this. So currently in the month of December, we are working on conducting peer observations. So now we want teachers to get into the room to see what their colleagues are working on and really get a chance to kind of get in the work and really talk about the work with each other. A lot of times, sometimes teachers don't feel like they may have a voice sometimes in certain things. So we really wanted to leverage the idea that we are on the ground with you in this work and we not necessarily don't have all the answers. So we want to hear from you guys to see what's working and what's not working and come up as a collective team for next steps. And along the way, I just also want to pinpoint when these assessment points were being utilized to make groups, we always made sure teachers met with students in a conference time frame to talk about where they were, the decisions that were made, and what they're focused on within this group, so that students also understood why I'm being placed in this group. I may not necessarily be with my friend, but I'm with someone who is on the same track as me, and we're all working on X, Y, and Z. So it gave students an opportunity to participate as well in the knowledge of the small groups process. Right here are just some of the successes that we've had at MGF, and these are taken literally from the voices of teachers. So every week I try to collect teacher thoughts around things, and if you want to take a second to read it, I just won't read every single one of them, but one of the biggest sentiments that were echoed was the target assistant plan for implementation. Teachers really loved that, and kids loved that as well, because it gave them a routine and it gave them a purpose. And then they had individual tinier benchmarks that they met along the way. So the student who may not have known 2 letter sounds now knows 7 letter sounds halfway through the quarter. So it really just gave them a focus and a reason as to why they were doing what they were doing. Also, what we found was that students loved the opportunity to really meet with their teacher kind of on a smaller scale. You'll see on the next slide, I actually have like little quotes from teachers and students just kind of around small groups itself. So I don't think it's enough for me, a person who may not be doing small groups on the day, to speak to small groups. I really wanted to reflect the work that teachers and students are doing around small groups. And again, you have a first grade student who just said, I like that I get help with my reading. So how they're even perceiving what's happening in these small groups, it just speaks to the volume of the work that's being done and the intentionality of the work that's being done. And I think what's really like profound to me is the second grade student who said, I like working with my teacher in a small group and not in a whole group. So to me, that lets me know I need to check in more frequently with the second grade student, because they may be lost in the bigger scheme of things, but really appreciates that time with me in a smaller setting. So I just think that this right here speaks to the work that's currently being done and the possibilities as to where it can go, and just the hard work that has been put into it. So again, I love it. And on the last slide itself, you will actually see it in process right here. So you get to see all the tiny faces, the fact that they understand how to get to the center that they're in during that time, whether it be with their teacher or independently. And this is kindergarten and first grade classrooms just right here in itself. So this lets you know that there is no little person too small that can't appreciate the small group aspect. And I just wanted to highlight this because sometimes we just feel like it may not be suitable for the babies, and it may not be suitable for middle schoolers, but it can be done. It just has to be set up in the correct manner, utilizing the correct resources. So that is it. I will stick to my brief time. And I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Guthrie. I'm telling you, I don't know about anyone else on the call, but I immediately was drawn to those little people and their faces, their comments. Outstanding work. Thank you so much. We do appreciate the work that you are doing and how you are leading our educators. Thank you so much. All right, guys, we're going to move on to tutoring. This is the third system that we are putting in place to support our personalized learning. Next slide, please. Again, as usual, we want to just make sure you're keenly aware that we are using research-proven recommendations with respect to tutoring. So we're getting high dosage tutoring as a program that we're offering our scholars. We want to make sure that students and teachers are engaged in tutoring during the school day. It's intensive. It's at least 2 to 3 times per week. It's provided by a qualified tutor. We're making sure you understand that a qualified tutor is one that has received an ESSA rank, meaning you have a green light from the state that this person is using the appropriate curriculum to support our scholars with grade level instruction. And of course, this tutoring is individualized. So further really honing on that personalized component of learning, it's data driven. We want to make sure that not only is the tutor using data, but the educator that is recommending the scholar to engage in tutoring is using that data to support that decision for the student to engage in that individualized support. And of course, this provides a collaboration for both the teacher as well as the tutor. And that's the biggest part. I think you mentioned, Dr. Guthrie, that teachers were appreciative of just that time that they got to spend with each other and forming that PLC, that professional learning community. And so again, we continue with that type of dialogue amongst our educators as well as our partners through this tutoring to ensure that our scholars are getting what they need. We know for sure that tutoring will pay off. We're hoping that individualized support will pay off. And so we have provided, next slide please, another guiding light for our educators and school leaders when it comes to our tutoring. And this is a best practice for both ELA and math. 2 to 5 times per week during the school day. It's important that we keep harping on that during the school day. We want it while the student is actively engaged in that work. 4 students or less in each tutoring session. Again, it's individualized, but we're making sure it's small too and nicely knit so that each scholar has that individualized time in a smaller group setting. And of course, the average for that time per session is about 20 to 30 minutes. And the time will more than likely increase with age. But most importantly, this is our desired state. Not all of our schools are there, but they know where we're aiming, and we're certainly going to hold their hand in support and provide them with what they need in order to reach this desired state. All righty, and now I get the pleasure of introducing our third educator, and this person is Christina Pollock Hilinski. So if you would go ahead and share with us your experience, we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. And once again, thank you for this opportunity. I am a multi-classroom leader and the APF for ELA for Glenmount Elementary Middle School. And it's a pleasure to be here. And as I'm listening to others talk, we're talking about all these things. We want to accelerate learning, my children, time, all these buzz phrases, words. But the biggest thing here is really looking at, when we look at the science of reading, that 95% of our students regardless of their background, are cognitively able to learn to read. But our data doesn't show that. And so what is it that we're not doing from the school level, from the district level, to get our students there? And so we talk a lot about small groups. We talk a lot about how are we getting to curriculums and building teachers' knowledge to, in turn, increase students' knowledge. But I'm finding at our school and at other schools that even in a small group, teachers don't really know what to do in small group. They know that small group is, hey, I'm going to pull these students, but it's what you do in that small group that makes it beneficial. And so listening to her speak about the TAP plans and really grouping those students. And so our tutoring program for foundations, it has been not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it has been beneficial. We've had things that, and sorry, I don't have any slides, but we've had things that have gone really well, and we have areas of growth. And so I'm going to kind of bring to light both of those. And we take a look at that time. So that buzzword time, some of this tutoring takes some of that heavy lift off of teachers that don't have time to get to some of their students. They don't have time to really hone in on those individual needs of students. And so this tutoring has been beneficial for that component of it, because what we're doing is we're taking the data, the Amplify assessment, and really going from our K-3 babies, really K-2 here at Glenmount, and we're looking at the data and where the students are falling. And we're looking at those students that would really fall in a tier 2 and giving them a double dose of the needs that they need. So taking them and finding those students that really need that double dose. They need to accelerate, to push forward on those specific skills. And then it's really giving us a tracking device. So when we look at the Amplify and we look at the greens and we look at the blues and we're like, woohoo, these kids are really learning. What we don't always look at is that red, and we don't always have a tracker for it. So we talk at our school about breaking cycles. How do we break this cycle of constantly having these red students? How do we break these cycles of I did this, I did this, I did this, because this is what the scope and sequence says. This is what the teachers are told to do. How do we break that cycle? And so this tutoring is really helping us to break cycles of really looking at those red students and how are we pushing them, or those yellow students, those orange students. Even though Amplify doesn't have an orange, there really are some orangish students, those ones you can really pull up to that yellow and eventually to that green. And we're really looking at those kids and how are we breaking the cycle of, okay, well, they were yellow, I moved them a whole year, but they're still yellow. Or those orange kids, I moved them a whole year, but they're still orange. I'm not accelerating. I'm just putting them on a path of continually to be underperforming. And so this tutoring has been beneficial because we're seeing 80 to 90% when we're looking at those students and those specific skills that they're focusing on, we're seeing growth. And so that growth in turn, year after year after year, if I build upon that growth, eventually those orange are going to turn to a yellow. Those yellows will turn to a green. And ideally getting them there faster would be what we're looking for. But like I said, nothing is perfect in this intervention. There have been some great things. We've had a lot of building the capacity of these tutors with a lot of trainings for foundations and how to teach the students, what to teach them, how to look at the data. We constantly are looking at the data, but not just the Amplify data, at their individual progress goals and tracking those to see where they are. But some of the challenges are finding just the right student. what student is just right for this program. We found in kindergarten, it was a little different. We took the amplified data, and we were putting those yellowish kids, but those yellow kids already knew letter names for the most part. So we had to figure out what students would benefit, because if I'm giving them a double dose of foundations and they're still working on letter naming for the first part of the year, it wasn't beneficial, because I'm taking kids who already knew this or were on track for this, and I'm giving them something they didn't quite need. So looking at that just right is where we're trying to figure out how to adapt at our school level to make sure it's beneficial, and really refining that. And so as we refine that, it's seeming to be very beneficial for Glenmount, especially with these tutors. And besides just the foundations impact of it, and I know I'm taken away from just talking about the what I'm intended to talk about, but we talk about the holistic, those students, and building a rapport, and really that recovery. We're trying to recover students, and not just recover academics, but recover them holistically. And our interventionists for our tutors have been beneficial in that. They're building a rapport with students. They're getting them to want to learn again and not just play on a computer or play on a phone. And so it's another body that is building a rapport with students and getting them to be excited about learning. And so tutoring has been very beneficial for us. And that's really, I mean, the biggest thing is really refining and adapting it to meet the needs of our students and our school. But it's really those buzzwords, the time, the accelerating, it's really breaking cycles of students. And so that's been the biggest focus for us.
Outstanding.
And honestly, if we're looking at it in terms of accelerating, and I know someone had spoken about if they don't have that foundation, it only gets harder. Really, if they aren't fluent readers by the 3rd grade level, fluency doesn't guarantee comprehension, but without fluency, there is no comprehension. So if we're not accelerating their learning to get there, then what's going to happen as they get older?
Well, thank you so very much. We appreciate that. And you made it extremely clear that our tutoring is not only supporting students, but it's also supporting our educators. Thank you for that. We appreciate it and look forward to hearing more about what you are doing and how you are leading the educators. At this time, we can go to the next slide. We would like to make sure we have an opportunity to discuss the small group instruction and or the tutoring or any other thing that you guys would like to ask questions.
It's really great to hear from, you know, a myriad of schools, right? We heard from a school that was in Hampden, then one that is further east at Glenmount. We heard from Marie Faring, right? South Baltimore. So it's nice to hear what's happening throughout the city. I have a couple of thoughts. First, I know that we've seen a lot of procurement letters as it relates to tutoring, but do all of our schools have tutoring programs? As we're talking about what is happening, so I see a head shake, no. But as all of our schools, we heard from a school today, but what's happening in all of our schools? So this is great at Glenmount, right? But do all of our students have access to tutoring programs in their schools? And if not, how are we planning to move forward to ensure that the same thing that is being experienced at Glenmount is being experienced in West Baltimore and all over the place?
So Commissioner McFadden, let me jump in. So we do have a commitment this year to pair every school with at least one tutoring partner. However, a single tutoring partner may not address the comprehensive tutoring needs of a school, because a tutoring partner may focus just on literacy or just on math. And so if you need both, this is where, as we're scaling up our tutoring work, like many districts across Maryland, across the country, keeping up with the demand, knowing that in many instances we are looking to hire more tutors, or our partners are looking to get more tutors. So some of it is there's a scarcity of the actual resource of tutoring, and it's matching the partner with our needs at the different levels. And so one of the things that I think we've talked a little bit about is that there have been very clear guidelines on what qualifies as this high dosage, high frequency tutoring, and we have to meet those guidelines with a partner in order for the funds that we've received to be utilized for these services. So we're not in a space where we can have sort of what we might have in the past had volunteers tutoring, and we've engaged. The way in which we've got to structure some of our tutoring is a little bit more bounded by some of the grant restrictions, and these are based on research. So I don't want to suggest that those should not be considered, because they certainly should. However, it has made our ability to scale up somewhat impacted because, again, there are very clear requirements of what are needed. So what I think we would like to do here is we have another R3, I believe it's for the full board in February, and spend time just on tutoring because it is a very comprehensive, and I think we wanted to showcase it today in a very sort of focused, connected to our personalized learning. But the work that's happening right now in city schools around tutoring is exceptional. It's a huge lift of work, and we've had some dedicated colleagues in teaching and learning working on it, and it really does merit a longer conversation that we'd like to bring back to the board, given sort of the magnitude. And we want to highlight also some of the high school work that we're doing with it as well.
I appreciate that. And then secondly, I don't know if anyone else had questions about tutoring, but I want to go back to Dr. Guthrie, and I appreciate the presentation that you made around small group. Is there, and I appreciate you charted out, right, what happens sequentially from August to September, October, November, and December, right? Is there a data analysis protocol, so to speak, that I know that it seems like you all are using at Marie G. Faring, but is something like that happening across the district? Are we standardizing the type of protocol that allows teachers, right, to understand, number one, how to collect data, number two, how to disaggregate it, notice trends, number three, how do we then target instruction to support the needs of our students, and then how do we go back, review, revise, revisit, and then alter those student groupings to make sure that they remain flexible for the sake of improved student outcomes. So is that something that we're doing? So Dr. Dabrowski, if what you said is true for tutoring, I'm assuming that this is something else that is starting to be scaled district-wide, perhaps?
Yes, and I would say I think in some cases, and again, I'll certainly defer to Dr. Guthrie, as knowing the level of knowledge that our ILS coaches bring to the work to help and support our teachers to get into those data conversations. We know that it is through that unpacking of looking at our students and knowing that groupings are dynamic. You don't get put in a group and stay there all year. So you're right about how nimble we have to be with the data, and having a colleague like Joy in your building to make sure that that's prioritized and teachers can come together in data meetings and conversations. We know we don't have that kind of capacity at every school yet, and we do have in most of our schools, if it's not an ILS coach, we may have an academic planning facilitator. We might have an ACL who works across multiple. So we are, I think, having a lot of forward momentum in that area in ways to address exactly what you've just put forward there.
I appreciate that. That's good to raise and know, right? Because it's great to have a Dr. Guthrie at Marie G. Faring, but what if a school does not have a her? you're saying that there are other supports and options that a lot of schools are utilizing
They
to
are.
ensure that these data dialogues and discussions are happening to support our young people. So that's important to know and raise in general for the board, but also for our parents and for our families and community members to know that these types of things are happening to target instruction for our young people as we are in this acceleration phase. I just want to say thank you for the work that those of you who have come to share in this committee. We don't often get an opportunity in these meetings to actually hear as much from teachers and folks on the ground. In recent months we have, but historically we haven't. So it's good to start seeing and hearing from what is actually happening in our schools on the ground from a myriad of schools. I'm going to lend my colleagues some additional time as well. If there are any additional questions or thoughts, particularly around tutoring or small group. Chair Emeritus.
It's not a question. It's just, again, a follow-up to what you just said, Mr. Chair and Dr. Dabrowski. I'm hoping and I'm assuming that a part of the citywide professional development experiences and opportunities include uh, what we are experiencing this afternoon, because I think that as was said by I know Ms. Harkins said it, having teachers talk to each other is a great way of doing that. But I think also the chance to share from school to school across the district as well, to garner and gain new ideas and to hear some best practices and then to make some connections. So I want to thank you for this presentation, and it's just good to hear the things that are happening. I would agree. This is going to be an exciting year, baseline of lots of new strategies and ways that we can really enhance the work that we do with schools. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Chin, and even to the point, around not necessarily, it's not new, but just what is best, right? For example, the targeted, the way that Dr. Guthrie, and a lot of what you said just stuck through based on what I do every day, right? Targeting informals and walkthroughs, right? We're targeting them. So we're not just going to classrooms to do informal observations or just doing formalized. It's specific, right? We're looking for specific things and we're going through specific walkthrough cycles to make sure that that is informing the work that we're doing so that we're really driving instruction. So to Commissioner Chinya's point, yes, this has to happen in professional learning, professional development, offerings to our teachers and staff so that they're able to hear what is happening, to just share and take some of those things, principals as well, to their schools so that we can really start to implement this for all of our young people throughout the city as best as we can. Commissioner Reed, Commissioner Griffin, is there anything else that you all would like to raise, any clarifying thoughts or questions or connections?
I'm fine, thank you.
Just another thank you for the structure of this presentation. I definitely want to give kudos to the team putting this together and bringing in voices from schools so that we can hear directly from folks about how things are going. I particularly did appreciate a lot of the raising of the grows and the glows in the last part that we heard. And so, like, when folks come to present and share what's happening in the schools, just knowing that it's an open space to share what is going well and what could use more support, because that's how we really know how to continue to push forward, how to infuse more support for what is working well and spread that across the schools, and how to think more strategically around the things that need some more structure or some changes that may need to happen. So I just want to say thank you again. And I hope that this makes its way over into regular board meetings somehow. Like, let's bring folks' voices into those spaces too.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so as we think about moving forward, you see in front of you some of the work that we've begun to do and will continue to do in service of moving towards our desired state. So as just mentioned, encouraging more school-based voice in different spaces, including here at the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, professional learning across the city, board meetings, just really teachers learning from teachers, leaders learning from leaders, all of us as a community engaging in more community type learning. Again, engaging school leaders with a learning orientation, better understanding their school context so that we can take gradual steps towards a desired state. We know that different schools are in different places, but we've got to get to a place where everyone has a standard of care where students get what they need, and we continue to work towards that. We're already in the process of beginning planning for professional development for summer. And that's a big deal to start early in December and January to think about the needs of our teachers in our schools so that we're ready to meet their needs in the spring and summer months. We're excited to be bringing forward in February those plans for summer, as well as adopting high quality instructional materials for grades 9 through 12, which we've been waiting for a long time. So we continue to move forward and upward very carefully, very gradually. Again, we're in an unprecedented time, but our students need us now more than ever, and we continue to do our best to meet their needs. And so again, want to thank the teachers that are here, the team that's here. Big shout out to Aquella for framing and capturing where we are as a system. My good buddy Heather Nolan for framing the data for us and accurately helping us understand the progress we've made. Chief Dabrowski, Chief Jones, who behind the scenes are leading in big ways and providing our teams with support. And again, to Carly, Joy, and Christina, thank you so much for being here, for giving us insight into your work. And we certainly hope to see you all and more of your colleagues joining these spaces as well. Appreciate everyone's time and energy here. And I believe that's all we have for today.
I appreciate you all. We do as a committee appreciate just all the work and just encouraged by your resilience, encouraged by your passion and your drive to make sure that our students and our children are growing and meeting with success. Thank you all so much. And as we started out, right, this isn't easy work. The work is challenging, but it's not impossible. And you all are clearly showing us ways that we are actually supporting our young people to make sure that we're growing and improving outcomes for them. So thank you all so much for being here with us. And certainly you are welcome to attend all of our Teaching and Learning Committee meetings. You're welcome to come whenever you'd like to. Just let the chief know that you would like to come and just give us an update. We'll make space for you. Because it's really important, to Commissioner Griffin's point, to continue to hear voices from what is actually happening day to day in our schools. So thank you all so much. We're now ready for our procurement agenda for the evening. It is now evening, I'll say. It is 5:01.
Yeah, it's evening. Good afternoon, Commissioner McFadden and fellow members of the commissioners of the board. We have 8 letters this evening for consideration. And with your permission, I'll begin calling the names and giving a brief summary as we encounter them.
Please.
The first item is Barnes & Noble's Booksellers, Inc. and the Book Rack is asking for an increase of $6 million to cover a contract period from April 26, 2017 through June 30th, 2023. The increase is due to the spending on textbooks for students and staff use. In addition to sending some textbooks home with students, schools are replacing textbooks or buying new materials. Any questions, concerns?
I don't have any questions, but Mr. Coleman, it seems like you broke up just a little bit. I'm not sure if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, Commissioner.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, maybe let me use my in-house voice. Are there any questions or concerns? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. All right, our next item.
Is he frozen for everyone else?
Yes, he is.
Yes. Which is 7,
Yes, okay.
which is
Mr. Coleman, if you, what could help, I know what has helped with some others to help with like the bandwidth of the reception is if you turn your camera off, and we can just hear your voice, that might help.
How about that? Okay, let's start again. Okay, so the next item is equal opportunity schools. The total estimated contract amount is $74,000, which constitutes $10,000 for each for 7 schools with a $4,000 indirect cost. The term of the contract is from December 15th, 2021 to June 30th, 2022.
With this, Mr. Coleman, I'm not sure if Dr. Pfeiffer is with us. I just want to know how hey, Dr. Pfeiffer, I just want to know how the schools were selected for this particular program.
Thanks for asking. We gave schools the opportunity to opt in to this program. This is the 3rd year, I believe, that we're running this. So there are schools that have participated in the past that decided that they, had learned enough and wanted to continue to work with what they had learned thus far, while the list you see here wanted to keep going with this particular opportunity.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next item is a fine arts program, extended learning services. Leaders of Tomorrow Youth Center Inc. is the vendor. The estimated total amount of the contract is $4,500,000. The contract term is from December 15th, 2021 through December 14th.
Mr. Coleman, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We lost you after you said December 14th.
Okay. Yeah, December 14th, 2024. The proposal was submitted through our PQS program, which deals with extended learning before and after school programs.
So this particular vendor has come before the board before, and I know that I'm just curious to know what makes this particular contract different from the contract that we saw maybe 2 years ago. I can't remember. I'm not sure if someone is able to answer it now or if we can.
Commissioner McFadden, Josh Bailey from the Office of Teaching and Learning. I can answer part of that. So the biggest thing in terms of difference is there was feedback from the board as well as from our Office of Teaching and Learning to this vendor about their program. So a lot of the feedback in terms of their alignment to our scopes and sequences, their alignment to state standards, their ability, their being the vendor to be specific, the vendor's ability to track their implementation and progress, all of that was cured in this most recent solicitation. So our team felt that their capacity to meet all of those expectations were addressed in their new proposal. So that is the biggest difference, is that a lot of that sort of I guess oversight was addressed in between the previous contract and now.
I appreciate that, and also I'm almost sure that there are going to be questions from other commissioners as well that will come up about this particular vendor. So just be prepped for that. I also just want to say that I'm glad that we're seeing vendors like this, and hopefully schools are going to take advantage of programs, this type of programming. I do not want this type of programming, though, to supplant fine arts instruction with actual fine arts teachers and the plan that we've actually put in place.
Yes.
So if that is clear to principals, and I know that we've said it before, school leaders and everyone, I think it's important that we continue to reiterate that. I'm not saying that this is a bad program or event or any of them, because we're going to see young audiences too. It's just I don't want, you know, the supplemental and the enrichment programming to kind of take the place of fine arts instruction that should be happening for our young people, if I'm making sense.
Yep, you absolutely are. And before a school would ever have the opportunity to purchase a contracted vendor, we would ensure that we being the Office of Teaching and Learning with Chanel Williams, we would ensure that they had the sufficient staffing with city schools employees. So they being schools are only able to purchase contracted services after Chanel's guidance is met. So you're exactly right that we would not supplant a city school's employee so that contracted services could be purchased. And then if I could add specifically for LTYC, it might be beneficial for any questions to be sent to the board office beforehand, just because there's a matter the Office of Legal Counsel is aware of that would just be beneficial if we could have the questions ahead of time with this particular vendor.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Tim.
The next item for consideration.
Mr. Coleman, 1 second.
Yeah,
Chair
no,
Mittens.
I was listening
apologize.
to, I'm sorry, I was listening to the last portion, but I just want to be certain, because what I heard Chair McFadden say is, you know, with or without additional questions, I think a lot of what you have just said to us needs to be very clear, either in the letter or in some narrative, so that, you know, you may prevent some questions by just stating everything that you've said very clearly ahead of time. So I just want to be certain that was heard.
Yes, point very well taken.
So perhaps, Josh, if this can be edited a bit based on what we just discussed prior to it coming to the board before Tuesday, that may be helpful. Mm-hmm. It will be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Very.
Thanks. Mr. Coleman, we can move on.
Okay, thank you. Next is the Fine Arts Program Extended Learning Services, also Root Branch Media Group. The initial contract for estimated services is $1,500,000. The contract is due to start December 15th through December 2021 through December 14th, 2024. Again, dealing with supplemental programs and extended learning.
Okay.
The next item, again, is from the Fine Arts Programs, Extended Learning Services, Youth Audiences of Maryland, Inc. Estimated contract amount is $2,250,000. The contract term is December 15th, 2021 through December 14th. Again, extended services for programming for schools.
Okay.
The next item is Maryland Teachers Tutors. A small group tutoring service at an annual contract amount of $2,500,000. The contract should run from December 15th, 2021 through June 30th, 2026.
Is there any information that we can get on the piggyback? I know on the piggyback, like what, because I'm looking at the evidence of effectiveness, right? And it says, Josh, that there's no data to reflect effectiveness for city schools. They're a recent supplier, but if we're piggybacking, is there any information that we can receive off of a piggyback contract that talks about any effectiveness?
Yeah, I can follow up with the procurement office on that question. I don't have anything, but I certainly hear the concern and can ask what's available from the public record. The nature of piggybacks is sort of where I would have to defer to procurement on that, but I hear the question and can follow up with them.
Thank you.
The next item is Carney, Callahan, Bressler, Bennett, and Shearer, LLP. It's a contract increase. The original contract was for August 11th, 2021, and will expire December 31st, 2022. However, they want to increase the contract by $60,000, provide a total overall contract price of $105,000.
Okay.
Next item is Panorama Education Inc. You spoke about it. It's a piggyback contract with Harris County Choice Partners, Panorama Education Inc. The estimated total of the contract is $295,350 to provide access to Panoramic Family Services platform. The contract term is from December 15, 2021 through June 14, 2022 with a 1-year renewal option.
Any questions, colleagues?
None here, Reed. None.
No.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You as well. Thank you, everyone, for being with us this afternoon, now evening. I just want to remind us that our next meeting is scheduled for, and I do not see it on our agenda. Christian, when is our next meeting?
Our next meeting is January 18th at, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, January 4th at 3:30 p.m.
Thank you. And what is on that agenda, Chief? I see you, Chief Dabrowski. If you could just refresh us on what we can anticipate for that meeting.
Yes, I know we are going to be bringing from the Office of Teaching and Learning and the Offices of Schools an update on our virtual learning program and our plans for both this year and going forward. So really excited to be sharing that with you on January 4th.
Great. I actually have a visit this Thursday.
Enjoy.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to visiting some of our virtual learning programs. Thank you all so much. Anything else for the good of the group, colleagues, Commissioner Reed? Chinya, Griffin?
None here. Thank you.
I hope that you all have I'm sorry, Commissioner Griffin, I see you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say none here either.
Awesome. Hope you all have a great evening. I hope that you all remain balanced. I hope that you all eat and nourish yourselves and do your best to stay healthy as our young people need us and our city needs us. So thank you all for all of the work that you do, your sacrifice, and we look forward to seeing you. The board does have a charter operator work session coming up on this Thursday, in addition to our full public board meeting on next Tuesday. I believe that is December 14th, I believe it is. All right, so we will see you all soon. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Good night. Thank you.